Apologists for empire say, you can't blame the British, you just missed the bus for industrialization. Yeah. My answer is, we missed the bus because you threw us under its wheels.
Hi everybody, I'm Suhasini and with me is Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Pleasure to be with you, Suhasini.
Thank you, sir. So Dr. Tharoor has just come out with his new book, An Era of Darkness, the British Empire in India. It's hit stalls, you can also order it online. Sir, I have one question for you. What do you hope to achieve with the book? I mean, it's not like England will turn around and say, here, you can have your Kohinoor back.
No, I don't think they will, though. In some ways, the fact that they're not giving it back is actually a very good reminder of everything that I'm saying in the book about the injustices they perpetrated. But having said that, the truth is that the book is really an attempt to put together in one place, perhaps for the first time, all the arguments against the British Empire in India. So the book is not just another narrative history, of which there are many. It's not just one aspect or one side of the problem. It's trying to take a comprehensive look as an impassioned argument.
Right. So everyone talks of the partition as an immediate legacy of the colonial rule. But how much would you, in the run-up to partition, how much would you blame colonial policies for communal tensions in undivided India?
Oh, totally. I mean, the entire Hindu-Muslim divide was a British invention. For example, when the British created the partition of Bengal in 1905, deliberately they wanted to separate the Muslim majority parts of Bengal and make them feel separate and have a different kind of politics there. What they did is they said to the Nawab of Dhaka, we should do this. Nawab of Dhaka says, it's a beastly idea, I won't support it. So they gave him £100,000 and he changed the story. And so very systematic efforts were made to separate the two, to instill a greater consciousness of separatism or separation between the two communities. In fact, the British were shocked to discover when they conducted their first census in the 1870s, how so many customs and practices seemed to be fluid between the two, how there were so many instances of Hindus celebrating Muslim customs and festivals, Muslims celebrating Hindu ones, families doing the same sorts of things together, Muslims repairing Hindu temples that have been damaged in bad weather, Hindus going and worshipping in Muslim shrines.
In fact, the binary was, are you Hindu or are you Muslim?
So that binary thing was introduced by the British, forcing you to take a narrow, exclusive sort of view of your own faith.
Are all colonial legacies, is that something we should frown upon? For example, the Bengal Renaissance. A lot of times it's linked to English education. So the abolition of sati or the Widow Remarriage Act. Aren't these colonial legacies that we perhaps should be glad about?
Well, the abolition of sati was done by the British, but very much on the demand of reformist Indians. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, for example, led a very, very passionate movement calling for the abolition of sati. But granted, the British did end that. Widow remarriage was never a British thing. The British had no intention of actually interfering with Indian customs. It was Indian reformers, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Ram Mohan Roy, many other Indian reformers who said, no, widow remarriage must be done. And some of these young people set the example by marrying widows themselves in order to show that there's nothing wrong with that. And even the good things, quote unquote, that we celebrate today were not introduced to India to serve our purposes. They were brought in by the British in pursuit of their own desires to rule India more effectively in their interests. Oh, very easy actually. First of all, we had and would have had a thriving textile industry, a thriving steel industry, a thriving shipbuilding industry. You know, textiles everyone knows about. Steel, for example, many people don't. It was India that invented the world's finest steel, which is called ukka steel in the south and known as wood steel by the time they took it to Europe. That steel was so good that the Arabs loved it, took it, and made these famous Damascus swords with it. So we had all of this completely destroyed. Our industrialization was set back. The kind of phenomenon of poverty and landlessness is a British invention. We had an excellent system in which the tillers tilled the soil and paid very modest levels of revenue to the collectors who in many cases zamindars, mansabdars, whatever, but they were in different parts of the country, different terms, but the system was universally pretty relaxed. Whereas when the British came, it became all very ruthless exaction of a very high rate. The lowest rate of taxation by the British was 45% of the crop. Very often it went up to over 90%. It was deeply insulting. There were no allowances made for famines, droughts, any concessions. The horrendous loss of life in famines. About 35 million Indians were killed in unnecessary famines, including about 4 million in the Bengal famine of the Second World War. So it was really horrendous. I mean, these deaths can be laid squarely at the feet of the British. A fourth thing I definitely would point to is partition. We've talked about this already. But I don't think partition would have occurred, and this division of India and the festering sore that partition has become, with 70 years of bristling hostility between India and Pakistan, now in its latest manifestation characterized by terrorism and now even the threat of nuclear war. It's shocking, and it's again a contribution of the British to our country. And finally, I would probably point to the sort of the colonization of the Indian mind and the setbacks in many ways that has created. I don't buy into the hyper-nationalism of some today, because I find there's a rather petty and bigoted form of nationalism. But I'm proud of the nationalism that Indians should celebrate, of the great accomplishments of India that the British ignored or sidelined or forgot, and the all-inclusive pluralist nature of that nationalism.
Did you anticipate that kind of response?
No, I didn't, because, I'd been reading history and been passionate about it since my school days. So I kind of naively thought that what I was saying was what everybody knew.
Yeah.
I guess it went viral because everyone didn't know it. And to many, particularly young people, a lot of what I was saying came as a revelation. So my publisher called me and said, "You've got to make a book out of this." I said, "Come on, what's new?" And he said, "No, what is new is that you put all this together in ways that people haven't heard before. And we need a book that actually gives them this material to refer to and so on." And so in a curious way, without writing a scholarly work, I've tried to help educate the Indian public about it.
So this is someone who's tweeting to you after you retweeted a certain article. It says, "Shashi sir, after listening to your marvelous speeches, I never get why you RT illogical articles."
I have made it very clear my RTs are not endorsements.
Yeah.
If something interests me, if something amuses me, if something provokes me, I retweet it because I want a larger number of people to have the same experience I've had, or maybe have a different experience if they have a different set of beliefs. But people forget my thing. It says so right in my Twitter bio. RTs are not endorsements.
Okay. Okay, so the next one is, this is about one of your articles, something that you tweeted. It says, "Very well said, nice article, sir. I must say you please quit Congress. They don't deserve you. Join #BJP.
Actually, I think the Congress in many ways represents the mainstream nationalism that I write about in this book. Mind you, in the book, there is nothing that either the BJP or the left needs to disagree with. Because though there's no Marxist jargon here, the critique that the leftists have of the British rule in India is essentially the same as the Congress has and as the BJP and the right, Hindutva right would have, which is about how the British indeed exploited us, indeed deracinated us, indeed conducted innumerable cruelties. We haven't talked about Jallianwala Bagh and the massacres and all the sufferings. So there's no question that this is an issue that need not divide us.
Okay, so the next one is by someone who calls himself Tharoor Bhakt. It says, "Bhakt would love to play cricket with you to entertain your Guruji, but alas, you have no time." So
that is sadly true. And also, frankly, I'm now past it.
Yeah.
I used to love playing cricket whenever I could as a child, though my asthma severely limited my success at the sport. I always used to joke, that I wanted to play cricket very badly. And that's exactly what I did. I played cricket very badly.
Yeah, in fact, the next one says exactly
so I think my cricketing days are now over. Sorry, Tharoor Bhakt.
Okay, so that's for you, Tharoor Bhakt. All right, so I'm going to come back to your book. So would you deny that you do belong to a category of an intellectual elite? You were born in London, you spent some time in convents, you went to St. Stephen's College. So aren't you also in some ways a product of a colonial heritage?
It's impossible to get away from that fact that whoever we are today has been made possible by the experience of the last couple of 100 years. And that's true of anyone, not just me. Somebody who's going to an Arya Samaji school. The Arya Samaj was founded in the 19th century, partly in reaction to what people saw being done to the idea of India by the British. So, I think one could argue that there really is no one who can escape the influence of the past. And therefore, any of us would be affected by it.
Finally, sir, this is your 16th book, is that it? So, what is your regime for writing? Does Shashi Tharoor procrastinate?
Oh, don't we all procrastinate? Especially when the cricket season is on, I'm always distracted by the latest score, which is where I'm going to rush to as soon as we finish this conversation. But I can say that I really don't have a regular routine. But for this book, I needed a bit more than all my usual sporadic writing efforts, because it involved the assimilation of a lot of research and a lot of complicated arguments. And so for the first time, I actually took a chunk of time. It was 12 days, which is not a lot of time, but I took that off with the patronage of His very kind and generous Majesty of the King of Bhutan, who lent me one of his cottages in the mountains of Bhutan. Indian SIM card didn't work, no calls, no visitors, completely free and peaceful to write uninterrupted for 18 hours a day. So I got the entire first draft of the book written in this mad rush, about 50,000 words in 12 days. And then I started writing the rest of it once the basic structure of the narrative and the essence of the arguments had been laid out. I could keep adding and inserting and expanding thanks to word processing until finally the book is in the present shape you've got, which is 100,000 words. So without that first draft giving me a clear core narrative, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Thank you so much for talking to us, sir. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks for listening.